And we're back. Welcome again to another episode of Inside Out, exploring the roads to redemption. And I'm your co host, Dr. Lawrence, and I'm the proud executive director and founder of A Bridge to Light, where we focus on not and only enabling underserved communities to overcome obstacles that historically hindered their progress. However, we are particularly interested in focusing on disrupting the school to prison pipeline and enabling the reentry of formerly incarcerated persons. And I'm joined with our brother and our friend, Mr. Thomas Cotton.
Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you guys back, and we're happy to be here. My name is Thomas Cotton. I'm the founder and CEO of Redemption and Advancement Alliance, where our mission is to disrupt the cycles of incarceration. And we do that by helping the most important part of reentry and prevention, the person, to create a blueprint for life so they may overcome the barriers that they face. Glad to be here with you all. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share.
You know, Thomas, here at Inside Out, we explore the road to redemption for particular obstacles a justice impacted person or community may encounter when attempting to reenter society. So that's the purpose of this show, and I thank everyone for tuning in. You have an option to tune in or not, so we appreciate it. And one particular person that I truly appreciate tuning in is my aunt. She's about 80. Oh, I didn't say her age.
You didn't say that out loud. I
I
didn't
didn't
hear
say
it.
it out loud. But she's been a faithful, subscriber to our show. And she said that I just didn't know the challenges that the justice impacted person faces. I just thought that they get arrested, they go away, and they come back. I did not know the effects not only on the justice impacted, but their community, their family, the governing body, which is charged to provide services to them while they're incarcerated. She just didn't know, like many of us. So our goal and intentions here, a lot of these topics, we go way deep into them, but we don't. Our motto here is we be good, we be brief, and we be gone. So we can try to brand that information into your brain so you can ask deeper questions later on. And we really, really appreciate, the questions that we received, the texts that we received, to further inquire about certain topics about our shows. And Thomas, I'm sure you've told me some of your engagement. So can you share with our viewing audience?
As far as the engagement with responding to the audience that's engaging with us.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, when we start thinking about the engagement that we have with people, people are learning a lot from this podcast. As we engage and as we put the information out there, we're putting it out there from a different perspective. We're putting it out there from a perspective of care versus criminalizing somebody. And so a lot of times people don't see that there's a different level of care. And even in our topic today, we're going to talk about ethical issues. But we have to remember that the justice system is also often viewed as a single river of people that flow from arrest to the correctional system. But it's more complex than just the criminal procedure aspect. And that's what people who are watching this, they're seeing. There's so much more than just criminality. In reality, it involves different agencies that focus on healthcare and focus on people who are incarcerated in their mental health and drug treatment. They have a variety of different chronic issues. There's reentry, there's rehabilitation, there's the victims of the crime. So there's so many different aspects that we talk about on this show. And that's what we're hearing back from people, is that they can appreciate that they get to see another side of justice-involved care versus criminal justice.
You know what, Thomas? Thank you for just giving your thoughts on just the criminal justice system. There's absolutely, I'm sure there's a few, so I can't say it's absolute. But this is the only show that speaks to justice impacted or justice involved persons. And later on in future episodes, we're going to get specific as far as a couple of issues, particularly violence and how it affects the justice impacted or justice involved person and system. But tonight we're going to examine ethical issues and how they impact persons who are involved in the healthcare system, i.e., their loyalty with respect to what were they charged to do when they were hired onto in a prison or a jail. So, with that, we're going to look at a question. We're going to look at the healthcare professional, and they are actually a minority within a security environment. Sometimes they are forced to comply with the security culture, and not their Hippocratic oath, which is to do no harm. So Thomas and I kind of spoke about this early on before the show started. Thomas, can you take us a little bit further as far as the dilemmas or the ethical issues that healthcare professionals sometimes are faced when in security environments?
Yeah, when we talk about secure environments, a lot of times we have to remember jails and prisons are secure facilities. And the number one priority in those facilities is security. I've volunteered as a chaplain quite a bit and in the past. And one of the things I've learned from the many facilities that I've been in on this side is that everyone says if something happens when it comes to security, you can be stuck in here.
Mm,
You can be there's things that can happen to you,
right,
and you may not have anybody that can come directly and help you.
right.
It's a secure facility. So if it comes down to security or your safety, security's first. When it
Mm,
comes to healthcare providers in prison, they also face these unique challenges that lead to conflicts because they encounter many different things. They have this Hippocratic oath that they've taken to provide healthcare, and usually in a normal healthcare setting, that's the number one thing for them. But when they have to acknowledge and understand the different challenges when it comes to security, correctional staff is going to prioritize the security.
yeah.
The healthcare provider needs to prioritize patient care. But then when the two conflict together, there creates this dilemma
Mm,
between the person. There's so many other things that happen, but when we talk about culture, we could talk about blue culture, for example. I'll use that for example. We know that there's a blue culture. There's this blue wall, and when it comes to police and different things, they talk about it. So I'm not bringing up anything that's questionable or anything. But there's this blue wall where they stick together because they got to know each. They have
mm,
each other's back. When it comes to security and care, a healthcare provider will go into a facility and
right.
they want to know they're coming out. They want to know the correctional staff has their back. So there's going to be this dilemma that's created because I have to side with this person who has the keys versus anything else if I know I'm going to try to get out of here safely a lot of times. Now there are people who are excellent in these facilities. They know what they're going in for. They go in, they provide great care. I remember when I was in a county jail for over a year, and they had this thing called pill call. The nurse will come around, she'll have her little cart, and they also have I forgot what it's called right now, but when they call you for medical care, you got to fill out a kite, send it in, they'll call you in for medical care. And the nurses in this space were excellent. They never crossed lines. They never treated you wrong. The people who would just walk up and be like, "Hey, I need this," they would kindly help them. And I remember seeing good healthcare while
Right.
I was in this county jail.
Right.
But I've also seen terrible healthcare.
Mm,
I've seen people put kites in to go see a healthcare professional, and it would be weeks before they were seen for something that was kind of urgent. So when you start thinking about the understaffing and you start thinking about all these other things, it creates conflict, ethical dilemmas,
wow.
and we have to understand that medical staff and correctional officers, they go into these facilities and they want to go home too. And so there's some dilemmas that are created there, but also this is the one thing that we also bias. We have to look at bias. People are biased when they come into these facilities. People are biased when they look at people who
Mm,
have been
mm,
charged with the crime, not necessarily convicted, charged with the crime. And people who are in these facilities, there are biases toward them. And so sometimes the bias comes out, and that creates dilemmas.
Mm. You know, you mentioned bias, and I'm happy you mentioned bias because bias is supported by the stories we tell ourselves, or the stories that we've been told over and over and over again, and we accept those stories, and that form our opinion about a person and or a group. And we're gonna go more into that in a later show when we're particularly focused on cultural violence, cultural violence and its effects on the justice impacted community. So I thank you for kind of teasing that out, so we could kind of give it a quick commercial for a future show. But
Right.
you mentioned about the ethical issues and the loyalty issues, and you being a minority, a healthcare person being a minority in a greater population or a greater culture, security culture, and sometimes it's against their own will to kind of comply with that culture because they have to go home because you mentioned they have the keys.
Hmm.
Sometimes over time they start to gravitate to that culture and be not of themselves but become of that culture. And we've heard of situations where healthcare providers have deliberately withheld treatment or
Right.
support to chronically ill and those with contagious diseases to facilitate cooperation and or coerce that particular group. So that's something to be cognizant of, that not all, again, not all um, healthcare providers, in fact, possibly a very small minority falls into that category. So we're not saying that there's a group of people, a large group of people that do this, but there are situations in which sometimes there's been a deliberate withhold of insulin because they wanted, a typical to facilitate a particular act or activity or compliance for a particular one who was justice impacted. So that's very, very
Hmm.
interesting. Again, we could go deeper, deeper, deeper in this topic. These questions, these questions, we can write long papers or have hour discussions on it. But we just want to just tickle your minds with this. Just make you aware. Again, we just want to sear this information into your brain quickly, like a steak. Sear it one side, the other side. I don't eat my steak that way. If I did eat steak, but some people do. I just don't. Uh, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't. But moving on, there appears to be at times a lack of transparency with respect to reporting. And
Hmm.
there's various reasons. There's many reasons why there's a lack of transparency when uh, those who govern correction facilities, at air quote doctor records uh, to do certain things, i.e., to maintain a degree of funding, allocation of funding, personnel, resources, and so forth. So like during COVID, for example, just the number of cases were not fully told by some correctional facilities because they wanted to maintain their access to a particular funds and so forth. So, Thomas,
Yes.
you have any insight on that, sir?
So when you're talking about this dilemma of withholding care, and okay, so think about it: tied to funding, withholding care,
Mhm.
bureaucracies that hinder healthcare being provided. When you have private agencies providing healthcare, who suffers in this part in this situation? It's the person that's just impacted, the person who's incarcerated.
Right.
And so when you start thinking about everything that goes into a lot of things, the frustrations that are created by bureaucracy inside prisons and not just prisons, jails. Um, there's this idea of delivering timely and effective care. That's the idea. But when it doesn't allow, when bureaucracy doesn't allow you to do the timely care effectively, understaffing is a big deal in jails and prisons.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have a correctional officer that can open up, the spaces and places that need to be open so that people can get their health care, then the delivery time is off. The and then if the person doesn't get the health care that they're looking for, do you expect that person to be kind? "Oh, no problem. Just come back later." Or do you feel that they're gonna get a little bit more aggressive? They're gonna be a little bit more aggressive, and if they now disrespect the health care provider, sometimes the best way to get back at somebody is, "Oh, well, you're not gonna get care." And who's gonna check them on that? Nobody. And
Mm,
then all they have to do is fluff records,
mm,
shift records, make up a story, say that the person refused care or whatever it may be, and no one's going to check that. There's no check and balances to that.
right.
It's not like you have a whole administrative staff that just focuses on healthcare 24/7 like you would in some kind of medical office in the free world. And so a lot of times there's a lot of administrative barriers that create additional frustrations, which then create animosity between healthcare provider and patient.
Yeah.
And then you start to find this being the norm. You have this person that comes in, they're jaded now. There's hundreds and hundreds of inmates inside of facilities, and then you have a small staff of healthcare providers and professionals. And so when if 10 really get on your nerves, they can mess it up for the other hundreds. And
Mm,
so a lot of times what you're talking about, number one, healthcare can be withheld from somebody just
wow.
by ignoring it, by
Wow.
changing something, by
Wow.
writing. And there's not going to be any accountability. And by number two, by fluffing records and maintaining funding, it's important because jobs matter. You
That's right.
know, you have to provide health care. And there's a story that I looked up about the Arizona healthcare facilities in Arizona and how they privatized their healthcare and how healthcare was once lower. They put bids out there. These private industries came and they were able to. They didn't win the bid in the beginning, but then they Arizona got desperate, more and more desperate for healthcare, and so they actually accepted a bid that was paying out more to these private industries to provide healthcare, and from there, many other challenges happened. There was a young lady who was in the juvenile facilities, and she was not receiving the mental health care that she needed. And there was nothing truly wrong other than the way these facilities treated her and her medical condition. Um, it got so bad for her that she got depressed, overwhelmed, and committed suicide.
Wow.
A lot of times we got to realize that some of the barriers to healthcare and the dilemmas that medical professionals face, when there's a dilemma within a medical professional, it can be devastating for the person, the patient that needs the care. And
Wow.
so these dilemmas need to be addressed in a way where patients are cared for the right way. And I'm going to use this quick example and we'll move on. But if you look at a menu inside of any correctional facility, the menu will look amazing. It'll be meatloaf, mashed potatoes, this and that, and it looks like it's going to be a great meal, right? The the idea of a great meal is good. The delivery of that meal is something
Mm,
else. When
mm.
you look at this meal, it doesn't look like meatloaf. It looks like something they scooped out of a can and just put it on your plate. The mashed potatoes are definitely not. They're not real. They're flakes and whatever. And you just get this meal, and the delivery of the meal is terrible. That's the way healthcare often is. It
Wow.
looks good on paper, but then the delivery of it within the facilities, it's terrible.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. The lack of transparency affecting, the allocation of healthcare resources, funding, and obviously there's an impact or the oversight of all these actions and activities, there's an impact when there's a lack of transparency. But there's a lack of transparency that goes both ways, and we need
Right.
to identify that as well, because sometimes the justice impacted, just based on their understanding of the impact, if they do disclose, hey, I have this ailment or I have this issue going on with me, what that's going to result in. For example, it was stated that during COVID, many justice impacted persons wouldn't say that they had COVID because that spoke to them being quarantined. And quarantine is probably a nice word for isolation. So I would rather stay in general population. I'd rather stay where I'm at. I know what that looks like on the other side. And I would rather not do that. I would rather not do that for various reasons. So there is some transparency issues that facilitate unethical behavior, willful unethical behavior, and then some unconscious unethical behavior. So
Right.
with this discussion, ladies and gentlemen, where are you getting this discussion? Where are you getting this discussion from on a podcast, roughly 30 minutes or less, talking about deep issues such as this? You're getting it here at Inside Out, exploring the roads to redemption. So I ask you to like, share, subscribe, and engage. Engage us, engage each others. Let's have this discussion. Let's learn together. Let's learn together. This world is moving so fast politically, socially, economically. So in the information age, let's just slow down and have a conversation about these very serious issues that affect not only the individual but the communities in which we live in. With that, there are some perceived unethical or loyalty issues when it comes to uniformity and standardization of reporting or practices and procedures, namely at the federal level with respect to the state level. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And the reason for that is the 10th Amendment suggests that federal laws do not have to be enforced at the state level. Now, if you're getting federal funding, I think you
Yeah.
may I think you may want to support that. You may want to support that because you'll get that funding withdrawn. However, it seems to be a disconnect, and it probably gives the appearance of unethical behavior when a state does something different than the federal agent, the federal government. The standardization of maybe medical records. And Thomas Cotton and I have had long conversations on, from the federal level to the state level. The transference of medical records. Well, those are two different systems, and anything can happen between that gap, if the gap even exists, because it may even make it to the state level or
Mhm.
down to the individual. So there could be a perception of unethical behavior or disloyalty efforts in between those two, the federal and the state areas. Thomas, you have anything else to add to that, sir?
Yeah. When you start thinking about the where the system is not engaged and there's these overlaps of I don't have to follow these rules. There's no standard there. Um, I think that's a big deal because there's a person at the center of this.
That's right.
And we have to remember that the person is the most important part of the process. And if they have chronic health needs and you're missing this on a transfer, on a release, and they can't get their medical records, it debilitates them because they're going to be frustrated. You mean I was doing all this here and now I got to start all over, or you don't know who I am? I have to go through this whole other process. It and inside when you go to a new facility, you're getting acclimated to that new facility, the culture of that new facility, and everything else. It's like going to a new country.
Yes.
You're gonna have to acclimate yourself. So you're not really thinking about all the healthcare needs and everything else that you need. Of course, you're going to engage in the beginning in intake and say, "Hey, I have I have this need, this I don't know what they called it. I have this mental health need. I was diagnosed with, and I can't remember the diagnosis. If you're that type of person, they're going to try to get you the care, but then you're going to have to go through a whole other process. One of the things I would hope, and I know that when we think about correctional facilities, we think they all are exactly the same. But I would hope that a lot of the funds that are put out there for research can research a way of coming up with a solution to this problem. It's a
Yeah.
very simple problem.
Right.
But when we're talking about informed consent, we're talking about quality of care, access to care. There's consent is one of those things where um, the justice impacted person is a protected group
Mm.
because they're vulnerable.
Yes,
This
sir.
is a vulnerable, protected group, but they're not treated that way.
Mm.
And when you're at the mercy of everybody else, imagine every door you have to have open is open by someone else. They have the keys, and you can't move until they say move. You can't eat until they say eat. You can't do anything until they say. Therefore, you're even more at the mercy and more vulnerable in these spaces. There needs to be some synergy throughout the system in
Yeah.
order to care for the individual in some ways. Security has it, healthcare needs it also.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point, Thomas. Great point. It appears that just the lack of uniformity, the lack of standardization between facilities, um, it's woven into the structure. It's woven into the structure, and unfortunately, it creates a feelings of depression, frustration, resentment. It may create violence, direct violence, which leads to recidivism.
Mhm.
So, and when I'm thinking about this, when I'm thinking about the lack of interoperability or a lack of the ability for structures to speak to each other, I'm drawn to the case study of the 1980 ill-fated operation called Desert One. And you mentioned people are at the center of this. Desert One was a joint military operation with the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, and they were going to go into Iran and rescue the 53 hostages out of the U.S. embassy. Out of the U.S. embassy. But although their intentions were well, they were not speaking to each other.
Mm.
They were all acting in silos, similar to the state and federal. Well, the result of that was fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft collided into each other in the middle of Iran's Salt Desert, killing 8 U.S. Service members.
Wow.
Remember, people are at the center of this. Our inability to communicate in a standardized, in a uniform manner is a violent activity against that returning citizen because it prevents him or her from achieving or progressing towards their vision of just being just a productive citizen in the United States or whatever town that they're in. Just like Desert One, nobody intended for that to happen, but just no one speaking in a unified manner led to rotary wing and fixed wing aircraft, or rotary wing aircraft landing on or flying into fixed wing aircraft on the ground, killing 8 service members.
Wow.
So that's we want. I want to sear that image in our minds when we don't deliberately facilitate communications between entities that's trying to do well. Sometimes, as much as we want to do well, bad things happen. Bad things happen. So anything you have
And
to say?
that's anywhere. If we don't have good communication in anything, bad things happen. The ability to listen to the person who has a need is key here. The problem sometimes, though, and I'll say this, when you're listening to a lot of people who are lying to you,
Mm,
um, it becomes you become standoffish. So a lot of medical professionals are lied to. They're trying to be uh, was it manipulated into
Sure.
doing something. There's a lot of different things that they have to face. So again, I'm not without understanding of both sides, but I will say if we have better systems and we can create systems that are focused on care, not not just the criminality of things, we can see things from a different perspective. If you can have conversations with those who need the care and with those who are providing and have regulations that determine exactly what this is, have accountability, have people who can actually be administrative and document things on a regular basis, it'll help out a lot.
Right.
There are, when you think about facilities, also having adequate facilities matters. And I think a lot of times when it comes to the punishment of the person, part of that is not having adequate facilities. Like, who
Mm.
cares if they're criminals? They're
Right.
this, they're that.
That's right.
And so, if that's the mindset of the facility, eventually those who come through those doors to work there will take on that same mindset. And
Wow.
so, it's important to have protections against that.
Wow. Wow. I tell you, Thomas, we've spoken about a lot tonight, and we're just scratching the surface. We're not even going full in as far as the ethical issues, the loyalty issues that healthcare providers face, you know, directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously. Because again, sometimes the system is designed for them to not really perform at their maximum effectiveness.
Mhm.
But tonight just a recap of tonight's show. We spoke about just understaffed and underqualified persons in the correctional facilities and false reporting, non-disclosure, the withholding of treatment to facilitate particular environments, and a lack of uniformity, and how those efforts, again, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there's many more that we could speak to in greater detail in future shows. I mean, we possibly will, but their effects on the perceived unethical issue, activities that healthcare workers sometimes find themselves. So, with that, I truly appreciate this topic, and we look forward to you for you to like, share, subscribe, engage. Please engage us on this, because again, we will love to learn with you as we continue to explore the various roads to redemption. So, with that, I believe, as a founder and executive director of a British Light, that everyone and everything is a resource. It takes a network of progression to defeat networks of oppression. So, how do we make the net work?
And I believe as long as a person has a heartbeat, there's an opportunity for redemption. So the people that are in these facilities, they're not thrown away, they're not lost causes. There's an opportunity for redemption. So let's work together and see ways that we can help improve the lives of those who've made decisions, but no one else wants to be known by the worst decisions that have ever been made. Let's help these people overcome those decisions through redemption.
Have a good night. Thank you.